children, except one, grow up. They soon know that they will grow up, and the way Wendy knew was this. One day, when she was 2 years old, she was playing in a garden, and she plucked a flower and ran with it to her mother. And Mrs. Darling put her hand to her heart and cried, "Oh, why can't you remain like this forever?" This was all that passed between them on the subject, but henceforth Wendy knew that she must grow up. You always know after you're 2. 2 is the beginning of the end. They lived at number 14. Her mother was a lovely lady with a romantic mind. Wendy came first, then John, then Michael. Mrs. Darling loved to have everything just so, and Mr. Darling had a passion for being exactly like his neighbours, so, of course, they had a nurse. As they were poor, owing to the amount of milk the children drank, this nurse was a prim Newfoundland dog called Nana. She proved to be quite a treasure. How thorough she was! Of course, her kennel was in the nursery. Mr. Darling sometimes wondered whether the neighbours talked. He had his position in the city to consider. There never was a simpler, happier family until the coming of Peter Pan. Mrs. Darling first heard of Peter when she was tidying up her children's minds. Every good mother, after her children are asleep, rummages in their minds and puts things straight. When you wake up in the morning, the naughtiness and evil passions with which you went to bed have been folded up small and placed at the bottom of your mind, and on the top, beautifully aired, are spread out your prettier thoughts, ready for you to put on. I don't know whether you have ever seen a map of a child's mind. There are zigzag lines on it, and these are probably roads in the island, for the Neverland is always more or less an island, with astonishing splashes of colour here and there, and coral reefs, and rakish-looking craft, and savages, and lonely lairs. Of course, the Neverlands vary a good deal. John's, for instance, had a lagoon with flamingos flying over it, at which John was shooting, while Michael, who was very small, had a flamingo with lagoons flying over it. John lived in a boat turned upside down on the sands, Michael in a wigwam, Wendy in a house of leaves deftly sewn together. She had a pet wolf forsaken by its parents. On these magic shores, children at play are forever beaching their coracles. We too have been there. We can still hear the sound of the surf, though we shall land no more. Of all delectable islands, the Neverland is the snuggest and most compact. When you play at it by day with the chairs and tablecloth, it is not in the least alarming, but in the 2 minutes before you go to sleep, it becomes very real. That is why there are night lights. Occasionally, Mrs. Darling found things she could not understand, and quite the most perplexing was the word Peter. She knew of no Peter, and yet he was here and there in John and Michael's minds, while Wendy's began to be scrawled all over with him. The name stood out in bolder letters than any of the other words, and as Mrs. Darling gazed, she felt that it had an oddly cocky appearance. "Yes, he is rather cocky," Wendy admitted. "But who is he, my pet?" "He's Peter Pan, you know, Mother." At first Mrs. Darling did not know, but after thinking back into her childhood, she just remembered a Peter Pan who was said to live with the fairies. She had believed in him at the time, but now that she was married and full of sense, she quite doubted whether there was any such person. Besides, she said, he would be grown up by this time. "Oh, no, he isn't grown up," Wendy assured her, "and he's just my size." She didn't know how she knew, she just knew it. Mrs. Darling consulted Mr. Darling, but he smiled pooh-pooh. "Mark my words," he said, "it is some nonsense Nana has been putting into their heads. Leave it alone, and it'll blow over." But it would not blow over, and soon the troublesome boy gave Mrs. Darling quite a shock. One morning Wendy made a disquieting revelation. Some leaves of a tree had been found on the nursery floor,